Welcome, travelers. The lights are dimming, but the story remains. Tonight, we drift across the forgotten world of Gaia, a planet scarred by quiet wounds, where the wind still hums beneath cities built on bones. This is not a timeline. It is a retelling, shaped from truth, but spoken like legend. The night is long, the fire is low. Let us begin. Night draped itself over the iron bones of Midgar, smothering the city in an oily haze. Searchlights flickered, nervous and artificial, across a sky clogged by the reactor's breath. Beneath that poisoned canopy, the train carved through Sector 1, rattling on tracks set by a company that bled the planet dry. Cloudstrife, sword at his back, watched the doors slide open, felt the cold breath of Mako in the air, a sharp chemical bite that knifed through the sweat and grime of human life. He didn't flinch when Avalanche spilled onto the platform behind him. Barrett stomped out first, gun arm whirring, his steps echoing with iron certainty. The others followed, faces tense, eyes flickering to Cloud, measuring. They all knew why he was here. Soldier for hire, ex-Shinra, brought in for his skills, not his loyalty. Barrett's voice was a low growl. "Keep up. This ain't no place to get sentimental." Cloud just nodded, his face a mask. Professional, detached. He told himself that was all he needed. That was the job. But something gnawed beneath the surface, a friction behind the eyes. Maybe it was the smell. Ozone, burning oil, the faint electrical sting of Mako that pulsed stronger the closer they drew to the reactor. Or maybe it was the memory, fleeting, nauseating, a sense that he had been here before, or somewhere like it, and something vital had gone wrong. The group moved, Barrett at the point, his bulk swallowing the corridor, boots striking sparks on the metal. Avalanche fell in behind. Cloud's presence, silent and cutting, kept the Shinra guards from mounting more than token resistance. He moved with surgical efficiency, blade flicking out, a short gasp, a body dropping in armor. No anger, no joy, only the hum of muscle and memory. As they pressed on, Cloud caught Tifa's eye. She waited at the rear, martial stance relaxed but ready, her gaze holding a soft, wordless question. "Do you remember? Are you still the boy from Nibelheim?" He looked away first. Inside the heart of the reactor, the world changed. The Mako core was a wound in the city, throbbing with sickly green light. Pipes groaned, the planet's stolen blood pumped into turbines, spun out as wealth for the few, and sickness for everyone else. Barrett swore under his breath, voice nearly lost to the machine roar. Cloud crouched to set the bomb. As his gloved hand hovered over the core, pain lanced behind his eyes, a sudden white-hot flash. For a moment, he saw not steel, but something vast and organic writhing, an ocean of light and memory screaming behind the glass. Then it was gone. Just a headache. Just the reactor. Barrett barked, "We're on the clock. Set it, and let's move." Cloud's hands were steady as he finished. Competence, always, but a sliver of doubt had worked its way in. As they turned to leave, alarms screamed, red lights flaring in the murk. Shinra's private army poured in, rifles up, faces hidden behind reflective visors. Chaos bloomed. Cloud fought through them, sword a silver arc. He lost himself in the rhythm. Attack, parry, dodge, a dance learned too well. But something about the Mako haze made him slow, his movements dulled for a heartbeat by another stab of memory, a voice calling a name that wasn't his. Someone else's pain, someone else's life. He shook it off, pushed through, as the team regrouped at the access ladder. Barrett shouted, "Blow the bridge! Go! Go! Go!" The bomb behind them ticked down, a throbbing, omnipresent threat. They ran, metal shuddering beneath their feet. A flash, pressure wave. Cloud barely kept his footing as the explosion tore the world apart. Steam, smoke, the smell of scorched insulation. They scattered in the chaos. Cloud landed hard, shoulder ramming into a steel girder, vision swimming. When the smoke cleared, the others were gone. Somewhere above, the shriek of Shinra reinforcements. Somewhere below, darkness and the faint scent of earth and crushed petals. He staggered to his feet. Only one direction open. Down. He tumbled through a shattered section of floor, skidding into a place utterly wrong for this city. A ruined church, its roof gaping, moonlight spilling through broken glass onto a garden of flowers impossibly alive in the slum's rot. And there, among the blooms, was a girl. She knelt, unafraid, fingers tracing petals with reverence. Her dress was simple, a pale pink smudged by dust, a basket at her side overflowing with color. She looked up, calm as sunrise. Green eyes, gentle but direct. Cloud straightened, trying to find words that wouldn't sound foolish or threatening. The pain in his head eased, replaced by a wary curiosity. The girl smiled. "You fell from the sky." Her voice was warm, anchored in this strange oasis. "You're not the first." He hesitated. "Did I hurt your flowers?" "Some," she said, rising to her feet, brushing soil from her skirt. "But they'll recover. They always do." She studied him, not flinching from the sword or the blood on his sleeve. "You're hurt." Cloud blinked, looked down. Blood. Someone else's, maybe. He flexed his hand, the pain already fading. She offered him a flower from her basket, a small white bloom, trembling in the night air. "For luck," she said. "You'll need it." He took it without thinking. The petals were impossibly soft. The moment stretched, quiet and unhurried, suspended in the glow of fractured moonlight. Then, booted steps, harsh and fast, echoing up from the entrance. Cloud heard the unmistakable whine of Shinra hardware. The girl's eyes narrowed, worry flickering across her face. She stepped back, instinctively shielding her flowers. A sharp voice rang out, cocky, mocking. "Well, what do we have here? A pair of little strays. Reno, Turk, Shinra's cleanup crew. His electric baton spun in one hand, his blue suit immaculate, even in the grime. Cloud stepped between Reno and the girl. Instinct, or maybe something deeper. Reno grinned. Now. That's no way to treat a lady, ex-soldier. And here I was, thinking this sweep was going to be boring." Cloud tightened his grip on the sword. The flower girl's hand brushed his sleeve, light as breath. "Don't fight here," she whispered. "Not where the flowers can see." But there was no avoiding it. Shinra didn't leave loose ends. Cloud braced as Reno advanced, the baton crackling with static. In the blur of motion, Cloud's thoughts splintered. A white hallway, a helmeted face, a promise broken. But his body moved, all muscle memory and instinct. The fight was sharp, desperate. Reno was quick, his attacks unpredictable, but Cloud had an edge born of necessity. The girl ducked low, shielding her flowers, as the first pew splintered under the force of Reno's swing. Cloud saw it. Just for an instant, the faintest shimmer around the girl's outstretched hand. The flowers seemed to bend towards her, untouched by flying debris. He blinked, uncertain if he'd imagined it. In the end, Reno withdrew, backup closing in, shouting orders to box the place in. "You got lucky, pretty boy. Next time the Turks finish the job." Cloud turned, breathing hard. The girl looked at him, calm restored. "Come on," she said quietly. "There's a way out." They slipped through a gap in the stained glass. boots sliding on the slick rubble. Outside, the Sector 5 slums stretched, haphazard homes, shadows clinging to every surface. The air was different here, less chemical, more earthy, threaded with the distant cries of people startled from sleep. Cloud asked, "Why did they want you?" The girl shrugged, guiding him through an alley. "I think they're always looking for me. Maybe they're looking for you, too." She studied him, unblinking. "What's your name?" "Cloud." She smiled, as if that told her everything. "I'm Aerith." They moved quietly, sticking to the edges of light. In the distance, sirens keened, a warning that meant nothing in a city always on the verge of disaster. At the edge of a battered courtyard, Cloud stopped, staring at the patchwork of makeshift homes. Residents huddled together, voices low and frightened. "Did you hear it?" a woman whispered. "The explosion. The planet's screaming, I swear. Can't you feel it?" A man shook his head. "It's avalanche. Mark my words. They'll bring Shinra's boot down on us all." Aerith's hand found Cloud's, unasked. Her skin was warm, grounding. "Come on. We need to keep moving." Cloud's thoughts snagged on that word. Planet. He glanced at Aerith. She was listening, head tilted, as if catching a frequency just out of reach. Flowers growing in the dust. A girl who could calm the air with a word. He couldn't shake the feeling that something about her defied explanation. They navigated the labyrinth of the slums, Aerith leading with surprising confidence. "We'll go to my house," she said. "It's safe there. Safer, anyway." Cloud nodded. The streets blurred by. Fragments of conversation, faces lit by fires and fear. Overhead, a Shinra drone buzzed, scanning for fugitives. Cloud pressed Aerith against a wall, breath caught in his throat. For a heartbeat, her eyes met his, searching for something in the lines of his face. "You were soldier," she said, softly. Not a question. Cloud tensed. "Yeah, not anymore." She nodded, satisfied with half an answer. "Why did you leave?" He hesitated. For a moment, the name Sephiroth drifted through his thoughts, a legendary shadow. He felt a chill, the taste of old dread. "It didn't fit," he said, finally. Aerith didn't push. "You're not like them," she said. "You feel things." The way she said it made it sound like a blessing, not a flaw. They reached her house, an old structure, nearly devoured by the slums, flowers blooming wild in the tiny yard. Aerith opened the door, ushering him in. Her mother, Elmira, studied Cloud with cautious eyes, but Aerith's smile smoothed everything. Cloud slept for a few hours, dreams twisted, fragments of memory surfacing, white halls, the smell of blood, the sound of a name shouted from a distance he couldn't cross. He woke at dawn, heart pounding. He slipped outside. Aerith was in the garden, hands deep in the soil, humming an old, unfamiliar tune. The world seemed softer here, as if the violence above ground couldn't reach. Aerith looked up, brushing dirt from her palms. "They'll come again. You should leave, before Shinra finds you." Cloud considered it. The smart move would be to go. Yet something kept him anchored. Her quiet strength, or maybe the mystery that hung around her like perfume. "You shouldn't stay here either." Aerith smiled, fearless. "I always stay." Heavy steps sounded down the path. Barrett, gun arm still smoking, worry carved into his brow. Tifa trailed behind, her face drawn. She reached for Cloud, relief visible in the set of her shoulders, but didn't quite touch him. "Cloud," Barrett barked. "We gotta regroup. Shinra's already sweeping the area. They know someone got away." Cloud nodded. He glanced at Aerith. She held his gaze, an unspoken promise passing between them. "I'll be back," he said. It felt true, even if he didn't know why. As Cloud, Barrett, and Tifa moved through the slums, the scale of the aftermath became clear. People huddled in fear, eyeing them with suspicion or hope. A child clutched a battered chocobo plush, staring at the sky where smoke still rose from the destroyed reactor. At the edge of Sector 7, Tifa stopped, pulling Cloud aside. Her voice was low, urgent. What happened back there? She was searching for something. Truth, maybe, or a memory that fit the man in front of her. "You didn't seem like yourself." Cloud shrugged, uncomfortable. "Just a job." Tifa's fists clenched, then relaxed. She studied him, a flicker of sadness passing through her eyes. "You used to talk to me, Cloud, before all this." He started to reply, but Barrett's shout cut through the tension. "Let's move. Shinra ain't waiting for us to hold hands." As they walked, Cloud felt the city pressing in, steel and sorrow, the stink of burning metal, the ever-present taste of Mako. He tried to tell himself he was just a mercenary, just passing through. But Aerith's flower was still in his pocket, petals uncrushed despite everything. The world shifted, subtly but irrevocably. He wasn't just a sword for hire, not anymore. That night, at the battered counter of Seventh Heaven, Tifa served drinks with a practiced hand, eyes darting to the door every time it creaked open. Barrett paced, clenching his mechanical fist, the whir of servos filling the silences between their words. Cloud watched them both. He felt the shape of something new growing inside him, a responsibility he hadn't chosen, a future he didn't yet understand. Aerith's words echoed, "You feel things." He wondered if that was what set him apart, or what would destroy him in the end. The city hummed around them, alive with secrets and sorrow. Somewhere above, Shinra tightened its grip, preparing the next move. But in the church, among flowers, hope had taken root. Small, improbable, but alive. Cloud closed his eyes, letting the fatigue settle in. For the first time since leaving Soldier, he felt the weight of who he might become. Mercenary, protector, something else entirely. Morning was coming, and with it, consequences. Grey morning light seeped through the cracks in the corrugated metal walls of Sector 7. The world inside the slum was already on edge, restless, hungover from the violence that had shaken the city overnight. At the battered tables of Seventh Heaven, the remnants of Avalanche gathered, faces carved with fatigue and something rawer. Barrett paced the room, gun arm clenching and unclenching, the metallic whir of servos a staccato undertone. Cloud sat at the edge of the bar, eyes fixed on nothing. His body was here, but the weight in his chest came from somewhere farther away. He could feel the hangover of adrenaline, the sour taste of Mako in his mouth. And, strangest of all, the lingering memory of crushed petals, as if the church and the girl named Aerith were the only things in Midgar that weren't fake or rotten. Tifa moved behind the counter, pouring drinks she knew no one would finish. Her movements were precise, but her eyes darted to Cloud more than to the glasses. There was tension between her words, an uncertainty that pressed in from their shared past. Barrett barked orders, preparing for the next move, prepping weapons, talking up the cause. But underneath it all was a man on the verge of breaking. Every so often, he would look at the back door, jaw tight, as if expecting Shinra to smash through at any second. Every so often, he'd mutter his daughter's name, Marlene, like a mantra. The cause was bigger than all of them, but the cost was never abstract. Tifa's concern bled through her careful mask. She caught Cloud's gaze, searching for the old friend she'd once known in Nibelheim. "You don't sleep anymore, do you?" she asked quietly. Cloud shrugged. "No time." But the truth was more complicated. Sleep meant dreams, and dreams meant memories he couldn't trust. Faces, places, voices. The details never lined up. His version, Tifa's hesitation, the way she flinched sometimes when he spoke about their childhood. He wanted to ask her what she saw when she looked at him, but the words stuck. He pushed them down, like everything else. Avalanche's uneasy calm was broken by the whine of an emergency radio. A scout's breathless voice crackled through. "Shinra moving. Full sweep. Heavy units. Pillar under threat. Looks like they're going for the support." Barrett's face twisted. "They're gonna bring the whole damn plate down. All those people." The words trailed off. The math was simple. Destroy the support, crush Sector 7, bury Avalanche, and anyone else who got in the way. Shinra's logic was always brutal. Cloud stood, feeling his purpose return in the face of a real enemy. Tifa was right behind him, hands already clenched, knuckles white. "Let's go," she said, voice tight. "We can't let them—" Barrett slammed his mechanical fist onto the table. "I ain't losing nobody else. Not Marlene. Not this time." Outside, the sky above the plate was already thick with Shinra choppers and the flicker of spotlights. Alarms wailed. Real now. Not just routine background noise. The trio moved through alleys, past people who huddled in their homes, praying to anything that might be listening. Every block closer to the pillar meant more debris, more fear. At the foot of the support pillar, the situation was chaos. Gunfire cracked from above, Avalanche fighters clinging to their positions. Shinra troops advanced with ruthless efficiency. Somewhere in the smoke and concrete, a child's scream cut through. A reminder that this wasn't just a battle. It was a slaughter. Cloud led the charge upward, sword carving a path. Tifa fought beside him, movements a blur, fast, desperate, controlled rage. Barrett's gun arm spat fury, but the enemy was relentless, numbers overwhelming. Every time they pushed forward, another squad arrived. Near the top, Cloud saw Aerith. She was out of place in the violence, clutching a small child, Marlene. Dust and fear streaked her face, but her eyes were steady. She pressed Marlene into Tifa's arms, breathless. "Get her out. Now, I'll hold them." Tifa stared, wide-eyed, but there was no time for protest. She nodded, grabbed Marlene, and slipped away through a side stairwell. One last glance at Cloud, pleading for him to survive. Aerith turned as Tseng, flanked by Shinra guards, approached with cold detachment. His suit was immaculate, his face unreadable. "Come quietly, Aerith. This is for your own good, for the child's too." He gestured toward the exit. Aerith glanced at Cloud. Something passed between them, a promise, or maybe just a recognition of the limits of what he could do. She nodded to Tseng, surrendering. He placed a gentle but unyielding hand on her shoulder, leading her into the waiting elevator. Cloud watched the doors close, fury boiling beneath his skin. The ground shook, a deeper, more ominous tremor than gunfire. Cloud looked up, heart pounding. Explosions rocked the base of the pillar. Shinra engineers worked with cold precision, planting charges. The entire support groaned, steel warping under unnatural stress. Barrett roared, "They're bringing it down. Get the hell out." The climb became a scramble. Cloud felt the grit and heat of crumbling concrete, hands burning from the friction. The world tilted, screams echoing as the city's weight shifted overhead. The plate broke loose with a deafening groan. the sound of a civilization dying in metal and fire. Barrett, Cloud, and Tifa ran, leaping from collapsing walkways, dodging chunks of debris. The sky above turned white with explosions. For an instant, everything was sound and motion and panic. They made it clear, just as the plate came down. A wall of air knocked them flat. The world turned to dust and silence. When the noise faded, Sector 7 was gone. A wasteland stretched where lives had once been stacked atop one another. The air reeked of scorched plastic, burning flesh, twisted rebar. Fire licked at the ruins, rescue workers picking through the rubble, faces grey with shock. Tifa clutched Marlene, eyes wild with grief. Barrett dropped to his knees, staring at the crater, his home erased in a heartbeat. Tears streaked down his face, cutting tracks in the soot. "Marlene's safe," Tifa said, voice raw, trying to pull him back from the edge. "She's safe, Barrett." He pulled her into a rough embrace, shaking with relief and fury. Cloud stood apart, shell-shocked. This wasn't supposed to happen. They'd known Shinra was ruthless, but this was genocide, a message written in bodies and broken stone. He felt the guilt of failure. Too slow, too small, too human against a machine that measured its victories in corpses. Near the outskirts, Cloud watched a rescue worker try to coax a shell-shocked child away from the wreckage, the kid's tiny hands clutching a scorched chocobo doll. That image burned deeper than any wound. A life shattered, innocence gone, all because they dared to fight back. The silence after the platefall was the worst part. No more gunfire, no more screams, just the low keening of wind through ruins and the distant, hopeless weeping of survivors. Tifa grieved quietly, fists clenched at her sides, eyes never leaving the devastation. Her home, gone. Her resolve hardened, channeled all that loss into a new edge. "We can't let this be for nothing," she said to Cloud. "Aerith is still out there. We get her back, and we make Shinra pay." Cloud nodded. The failure stung. He'd been competent before, sharp, professional, always in control. But he couldn't save everyone. He couldn't save Aerith. The lesson cut deeper than any sword. Barrett's pain turned to anger. "Shinra's not done. They think this'll stop us? Not a damn chance. We get Aerith back, we hit 'em harder." Cloud's gaze found Tifa's. She looked at him, searching, uncertain. The contradiction in his story. Nibelheim, soldier, the boy she remembered, still gnawed at her. But for now, they had a new purpose. They moved through the ruins, dodging Shinra patrols, picking their way across what was left of Sector 7. The reality of the rebellion's cost was unavoidable. Homes crushed, families gone, dreams turned to ash. Cloud kept moving, each step an effort to outrun the guilt. News broadcasts flickered on scavenged screens. Shinra's propaganda machines spun the collapse as a tragic necessity, blaming Avalanche for forcing their hand. Some segments even hinted that the legendary soldier Sephiroth might have incited the violence. An absurd twist, but a seed planted, meant to muddy the waters. Cloud scoffed, but the rumor stuck in his mind, sour and persistent. The Turks, efficient as ever, had vanished with Aerith. There was talk among the survivors. A strange girl, called the Ancient, singled out by Shinra, for reasons no one understood. Cloud overheard Seng's words, echoing in memory. The Ancient. He filed it away. Aerith was at the heart of something bigger. As dusk fell, Cloud, Tifa, and Barrett found themselves on the broken edge of the slum, looking out over what remained. The sun set through a haze of smoke, the world painted in blood and ash. Tifa's voice was steel. "We go after her, tonight, whatever it takes." Barrett nodded, fire in his eyes. We do this for everyone they crushed. Cloud felt the old mercenary shell cracking. It was personal now. Grief and guilt wrapped tight around his heart. The fragility he'd glimpsed in Aerith, the concern he'd seen in Tifa, the battered hope in Barret. He carried it all, whether he wanted to or not. In the dark, they made plans. Shinra headquarters, deep in the heart of Midgar, impossible to breach, but Aerith's life depended on it. The anger and loss, the need to set things right, fused into determination. They'd failed the people of Sector 7, failed Aerith, failed themselves. But the story wasn't over. They'd make it right, or die trying. A battered radio played somewhere in the ruins, a song barely audible through static. For a moment, Cloud let himself listen. He thought of Aerith, her serenity among the flowers, and wondered if anything that pure could survive in a world like this. He looked at his hands, scraped, bloody, shaking with exhaustion. In that moment, he understood what it meant to carry the price of resistance, the weight of every life you couldn't save, the promise to fight on anyway. The slums were quiet now, but the war had only just begun. The night after Sector 7's fall was raw and endless. Wind swept ash through the ruins. In the jagged silence, Avalanche mourned quickly, then moved. There was no other choice. They had lost their home, and nearly everything that mattered. But they weren't finished. Not by a long shot. Cloud, Tifa, and Barret navigated the broken city, slipping between Shinra patrols. The streets crackled with tension. Above, floodlights and gunships searched for stragglers. Shinra was locking down the entire Undercity. No one in, no one out. Back in what was left of Seventh Heaven, the three met in what passed for privacy, hunched over a makeshift map, tracing routes to Shinra headquarters. Their voices were hushed, but steely. Barrett's anger was barely leashed. They took everything. Ain't leaving Aerith to those bastards. Tifa's hands shook as she loaded a clip. We can't let Sector 7 be for nothing. Cloud said nothing. His mind was a mess of adrenaline, exhaustion, and the taste of failure. But that old mercenary calm surfaced anyway. We moved before sunrise. They left before the city stirred, keeping to shadows, slipping through hidden passages Tifa had learned working the bars. Every checkpoint was tighter than the last. Shinra's grip was absolute, but desperation fueled them. The Shinra building rose from the city's heart, an ugly crown, glass and steel, glinting above misery. Barret spat at the sight. They get fat up there, while the rest of us rot. The plan was crude, but effective. A supply truck, hijacked at the loading dock, would get them inside. Once through, it was all improvisation. Security was tight, but not ready for people willing to die for the cause. Inside, they moved fast. Uniforms stolen, elevators bypassed, every step a risk. Alarms echoed through the distant floors, but the guards were scattered, the aftermath of Sector 7's destruction, sowing chaos everywhere. Their objective was Hojo's lab, where Shinra kept its secrets and its prisoners. The lab stank of chemicals and old death. They found Aerith locked behind reinforced glass, pale but unbroken. Her eyes found Cloud, and even now she managed a wry smile. "Took you long enough," she said, voice soft but steady. Tifa smashed the controls, and the cell opened. Barret moved to shield them both. Cloud offered Aerith a hand, but she stood on her own. Nearby, another captive watched with wary intelligence. A beast, big as a man, fur bristling, tail tipped with flame. The creature growled, voice low and gravelly. "If you would free me, I will fight beside you. My name is Red 13. Cloud didn't hesitate. He broke the lock. The beast leapt out, shaking himself, eyes bright with purpose. Tifa stared, but nodded. We'll need all the help we can get. The party moved as one now. Cloud, Tifa, Barrett, Aerith, and Red 13, upwards toward the executive floors. Security intensified with every step. They fought through, quick and brutal. Cloud's sword carving a path, Tifa's fists snapping bone, Barrett's gun arm roaring, Red 13 ripping through the gaps, Aerith behind them, never a burden, always steady. The higher they climbed, the stranger things became. The floors were deserted, offices stripped, only the hum of abandoned machines left behind. The sense of wrongness gnawed at Cloud, memories surfacing and receding. A corridor, a white room, voices behind glass. He shook it off, kept moving. Near the top, they found Hojo's trophies, failed experiments, twisted things in glass tubes, and in the largest tank of all, Jenova. Cloud staggered, sudden pain lancing through his skull. A woman's scream, fire, blood, a name on the edge of recall. Tifa's voice pulled him back. Cloud, we have to go. He forced himself forward. Barrett eyed Jenova warily. This what they're hiding? No wonder the city's cursed. Red 13's hackles were raised, his tone deadly serious. Jenova is not of this world. She is why the planet suffers. They kept moving, finally reaching the president's office. The scene stopped them cold. Blood on marble. The old man slumped over his desk, the impossibly long blade of the Masamune driven through his back. Tifa inhaled sharply. Sephiroth. Cloud's hands curled tight. He knew that sword. The name rang in his skull like a curse. Barrett broke the silence. Means he's still alive. No time to process. The doors burst open. Rufus Shinra entered. Young, crisp suit, eyes like knives. Flanked by Shinra's best. He sized up the scene without emotion. My father was weak, Rufus said. You're all terrorists, but I'm not interested in your politics. I'm interested in results. He looked at Aerith, calculating. You're coming with us. Cloud stepped in front of her, blade out. The standoff was brief and ugly. Bullets, steel, desperate violence. Rufus retreated. His guards fell. The alarms reached a fever pitch. Go! Cloud barked. The group scrambled up the last stairwell, burst onto the roof as helicopters roared overhead. Cloud scanned the skyline. We'll split, draw their fire. Barrett, Tifa, Red 13, and Aerith piled into the stolen truck waiting on the helipad, engines idling. Cloud swung onto a Shinra bike, sword sheathed across his back. He shot Aerith a look. She nodded, trust implicit. The escape was a blur of speed and violence. Cloud tore down the highway. Shinra pursuit vehicles close behind. He cut through roadblocks, metal shrieking, engines howling. The truck with the others careened alongside. Barrett at the wheel, Tifa firing out the window, Red 13, and Aerith hunkered in the back. Bullets ricocheted. Helicopters strafed the highway. Cloud's focus narrowed. Get clear or die trying. At the city's edge, the pursuit thinned. They broke through the last barricade as the first rays of dawn cut through the smog. Behind them, Midgar's walls loomed. Steel, smoke, a city choking on its own sins. The road ahead was open. For the first time in days, they could breathe. They regrouped in Calm, a quiet town just beyond Shinra's reach. For a few hours, the tension ebbed. Barrett checked his gun. Tifa crashed on a lumpy bed. Aerith sat cross-legged, eyes closed, listening to something only she could hear. Red 13 prowled the window, always on guard. Cloud sat with his back to the wall, the others watching. It was time for truth, or at least his version of it. He told them the story. Nibelheim, Sephiroth, fire and death, how he'd returned with a hero and watched him become a monster. Tifa watched with pain in her eyes, her own memories scraping raw against Cloud's narrative. The others listened, Red 13 solemn, Barrett's jaw tight, Aerith quietly sad. When he finished, silence reigned. The holes in his memory yawned wider than ever. Tifa looked away. Aerith only offered him a small, understanding smile. Barrett broke the quiet. We go after Sephiroth. We end it. For Sector 7. For everyone. Cloud nodded. Something solid beneath the confusion. Direction, if not certainty. Aerith spoke, voice low but clear. Sephiroth's not just a threat to us. The planet itself is afraid of him. We have to follow. Red 13 agreed. The balance is off. This isn't just your story, Cloud. It's the world's. As the group prepared to leave Calm, Tifa caught Cloud's arm, searching his face for the truth behind the mask. Are you all right? He hesitated, then shook his head. Number, but I will be. They left Calm at sunrise, the world suddenly vast and wild, beyond Midgar's reach. Black-cloaked figures haunted the horizon. Shinra's propaganda followed them everywhere, blaming Avalanche, twisting truth. None of it mattered. Their target was clear. Cloud led the way, not because he had all the answers, but because the story demanded it. And now, finally, it was theirs to write. The world beyond Midgar was shockingly vast, a reminder of everything Shinra had fenced off and exploited. Leaving the iron shadow of the city behind, Cloud felt the pressure of new air in his lungs, the raw weight of expectation from the people beside him. For the first time, the horizon wasn't bounded by steel, but by sky and uncertain distance. And somewhere out there, Sephiroth was moving, every rumor, every whisper, every corpse pointing east. Calm faded behind them, the last of their safe harbors. The hunt for Sephiroth was on, and the only clues were black-cloaked figures shuffling across the fields, like men caught between dreams and nightmares. Faces half blank, numbers tattooed on their skin, driven by something no one could see. Cloud led, a mercenary's focus layered over unease. The more he watched the clones, the more they felt like a riddle he was supposed to answer. A riddle he might already know, if only he could remember. The journey wound through the Chocobo farm, the earth already scarred by reactors. Chocobos scattered at their approach, fleeing the unnatural presence of the cloaked ones. Tifa kept glancing at Cloud when she thought he wouldn't notice, as if searching his face for the boy she used to know. Barrett was all blunt urgency. Every delay another risk to the world. The trail cut through the mithril mines, the air inside thick with damp and dust. In the dim torchlight, voices echoed ahead. Turks, Elena and Rude, slick and professional, already on the same scent. Cloud pressed the group back, signaling for silence, but there was no hiding from Shinra's dogs. Elena's voice bounced off the stone. We're not here for you. We're here for him. She nodded toward the darkness, where another black-cloaked figure had collapsed in the mud. You're not the only ones following ghosts. Barrett's patience cracked. Out of the way, unless you want to fight. But the Turks just smirked and retreated, leaving behind another corpse and another dead end. The message was clear. Even Shinra didn't know what the hell Sephiroth was planning. Or if they did, they weren't telling. On the far side of the mines, the landscape rolled toward Junon, a city straining under Shinra's boot. Security was tighter here. Checkposts, scanners, soldiers. The party moved in shadows, always one step from a bullet in the back. As they skirted the forest near the city, trouble found them anyway. Yuffie Kizaragi dropped from the trees, grinning wide, a shuriken nearly as big as she was already spinning in her hand. "Materia or your life?" Her bluff lasted all of 10 seconds. Barrett's gun arm and Cloud's blade made sure of that. But she wasn't just a thief. When it was clear she'd lost, she shifted in an instant, wheedling for a place in their ranks, trading information for a shot at their Materia cache. "Wu Tai's glory depends on it," she whined. "And besides, you could use a ninja." Tifa sighed. Barrett rolled his eyes, but Cloud nodded. Sometimes a little chaos was useful. Yuffie fell in line, skipping ahead, already casing every pocket. The heat of pursuit pushed them into Junon proper, but direct confrontation with Shinra was suicide. So they played it quiet, ducking patrols, moving under the city's smog-choked underbelly. The ferry to Costa del Sol was guarded, tickets for the right price, or forged if necessary. Yuffie's sticky fingers came in handy for more than just Materia. The ferry crossing was a brief respite. Salt spray stung the air, and for a moment, the world felt wider, less doomed. Barrett glared at the water, as if it might betray them, but Tifa leaned on the railing, watching the horizon, her worry briefly soothed by the rhythm of waves. Cloud held the Keystone tight, smooth and cold, the weight of the next chapter. Costa del Sol was all false smiles and empty glamour, a Shinra playground. The party didn't linger. Rumors pointed them north, toward the gold saucer, a monument to distraction, gaudy lights blazing against the dusk. But beneath the neon, business was business. They needed the Keystone, and Dio, the arena's owner, was a man who respected strength above all else. Cloud entered the battle square, every eye on him, the crowd baying for violence. He moved with surgical efficiency, sword, footwork, cold calculation. The show was enough for Dio, who watched from his private box, gold chains clinking. "Impressive," Dio boomed. "Take the Keystone. Just don't break anything else." The Keystone was heavier than Cloud expected. He tucked it away, feeling the strange pulse it gave off. Aerith shivered when he handed it to her for a moment. "It wants to be somewhere else," she said quietly. "We have to hurry." While they regrouped, a curious figure approached, a cat riding a giant Moogle, mechanical parts clattering. "Kate Sith, at your service." The robot cat offered fortunes and jokes, but Cloud kept his guard up. Something about the act rang false. Still, extra help was extra help. The party was growing whether he liked it or not. After securing the Keystone, the next stop was Rocket Town. The information came from Kate Sith. "You need Sid Highwind, only guy crazy enough to fly where you need to go." It was a lead, and at this point, they didn't have the luxury of skepticism. Rocket Town was half museum, half ruin, dominated by the rusting hulk of a rocket that never flew. Shinra uniforms were everywhere, sniffing for dissent. The locals kept their heads down, except for Sid Highwind, who was busy cursing out a Shinra manager for pawing at his rocket. Cloud found Sid mid-rant, smoke curling from his lip, goggles perched atop wild blonde hair. "If Shinra wants my rocket, they'll have to pry it from my cold, dead hands." His contempt was volcanic, barely contained. When Cloud explained the situation, Sid sized him up in a glance, took in the Keystone, the motley crew, the barely concealed desperation. "Temple of the Ancients, huh? Gonna need more than guts. You need wings." Shinra didn't wait for negotiations. Troops moved on the rocket, intent on seizing it. Sid spat on the ground. "Damn company already took my dreams. They ain't taking my home." The battle was a blur. Materia bursts, bullets, fists, and curses. Sid fought like a man who'd lost too much to ever stop. The rocket took a hit, flames licking at the hull, But Shinra pulled back, not wanting to risk total destruction. The cost was high, but the point was made. Sid looked at the damage, smoke drifting across his face, eyes as hard as hammered steel. Fine. You get me out of this mess. You get my plane, the tiny Bronco. Not much left of my dreams, but maybe it'll get you where you need to go. The tiny Bronco was old, patched together, but it ran. As the party loaded up, Sid's foul mouth turned softer, regret bleeding through. Rocket's all I got left. Shinra took my shot at the stars. Don't let them take the rest of the world too. On the edge of town, they passed a family packing up their life into a cart, forced out by Shinra's expansion. No glory, just quiet defeat. Cloud watched, jaw tight, every step forward a reminder of what they were fighting for. He didn't have answers, just the momentum of necessity. With Sid at the controls, the tiny Bronco skimmed low across water and field, the world spinning beneath them. Barrett watched the receding rocket town, eyes clouded with his own ghosts. Tifa gripped the rail, the wind tangling her hair, silent but resolute. Aerith traced the surface of the Keystone, humming a tune older than memory. There's something waiting at the temple, something old, something angry. We don't have much time. Sid snorted, but his tone was respectful. If you've got a way to beat Shinra and save the damn planet, I'll fly you straight into hell. The sun set, painting the sky in bruised colors. Cloud sat with the Keystone heavy in his palm, the responsibility settling like lead in his stomach. He'd come a long way from mercenary detachment. Now every decision mattered, every mistake echoed. As night swallowed the horizon, the group leaned in, battered but unbroken. The journey to the Temple of the Ancients was just ahead, unanswered questions piling up behind them, danger thickening in the dark. But for the first time since Midgar, Cloud felt something like purpose, shaky, uncertain, but growing stronger with every mile. Behind them, Rocket Town burned with the last dregs of Sid's dreams. Ahead, the unknown called, a temple full of secrets, the looming threat of Sephiroth, and the truth about the Keystone's power. On the wind, you could almost hear the planet's distant warning. Hurry. Time was running out. The tiny Bronco sliced across the rain-swept sea, battered but unbroken. The further they pushed from Rocket Town, the more the world felt ancient, overgrown, wild, as if the planet itself was holding its breath. Every conversation in the cockpit was short and tense. Every glance toward Aerith was tinged with concern. She seemed changed, her eyes distant, her voice quieter, burdened with the weight of knowledge she had no choice but to carry. The Temple of the Ancients rose out of the jungle like the fossil of a dream, half swallowed by moss and silence. Its walls were carved with symbols older than Shinra, older than Midgar, older than memory itself. The Keystone pulsed in Cloud's hand as they approached, the stone responding to the temple's summons. Aerith lingered at the threshold, one hand pressed to the archway, humming an old tune that vibrated through the air like a secret. Inside, the air was thick with voices, not of people, but of the planet itself, whispered warnings, songs of hope, undercurrents of fear. Cloud felt a pressure at his temples, the hairs on his arms standing straight. Tifa and Barrett tensed, both ready for anything, but there was nothing here that fists or bullets could fix. They pressed forward, deeper into the labyrinth, guided by Aerith's intuition. Ancient puzzles tested their resolve, illusions twisted their perception, hallways curved back on themselves, time stuttered, echoes of the past brushing against their thoughts. Each time Cloud faltered, Aerith would reach for his arm, grounding him, her touch gentle but unyielding. In a moonlit atrium, they found Seng, battered and bloodied, slumped against a wall, slick with his own blood. He managed a weak grin, pride undiminished. "I was too late," he rasped. "Sephiroth's already here. He wants the black materia. Wants to summon Meteor. You have to stop him." Aerith knelt, pressing a damp cloth to his wound, but he pushed her hand aside, urgency burning in his eyes. "Don't trust what you see. This place, it listens." Cloud took point, the keystone glowing brighter with every step. At the heart of the temple, the architecture changed, walls breathing, stone rippling as if alive. Murals lined the chamber, Citra reaching toward the sky, a dark star falling, the planet shuddering beneath the impact. The murals bled into reality. Cloud's vision swam. He saw Aerith among the painted figures, hair trailing like smoke, her voice merging with the chorus of the ancients. A great voice thundered, Sephiroth's, but not his alone. Something deeper, a resonance born from Jenova's tainted blood. Cloud staggered, hand tightening around his sword. He felt himself slipping, memory and identity bending under the pressure. Aerith's hand closed around his wrist. "Stay with me, Cloud. Don't let him in." He tried. He really tried. At the center of the chamber, the temple itself began to change. Ancient machinery shuddered to life, and the massive structure contracted, shrinking in on itself with a deafening grind of stone and time. Where the temple once stood, only a fist-sized orb remained. The black materia, dense with power, colder than death. Cloud picked it up, and for a moment the world went silent. A voice, his own, yet not his own, whispered, "Give it to him. He is the only one who understands. You're nothing. He is everything." Cloud's grip tightened. Sweat ran down his back. He could feel the others watching, waiting. Barrett's voice, gruff and urgent. "Cloud, you all right? Say something, man." He shook himself. "I'm fine." But it was a lie, and everyone knew it. The silence was broken by the arrival of a man in a black cloak, eyes hollow, steps unsteady. A Sephiroth clone, face etched with the numbers of his fate. He looked at Cloud, lips trembling. He says, "You know what to do." Cloud's vision blurred. He fought to stay present, to remember who he was. Tifa called his name, her voice cutting through the fog. "Don't. Cloud, fight it." But he couldn't. Not now. His body moved without permission, hand outstretched, the black materia slipping from his grasp and into the clone's waiting hands. A pulse of dark energy flooded the room. The clone staggered back, cradling the artifact, as a vision of Sephiroth materialized above him, smiling, triumphant. "Thank you, puppet." His voice echoed in Cloud's skull, leaving him gasping, hollow. The spell broke. The clone stumbled into the shadows, black materia clenched to his chest. Cloud collapsed to his knees, fingers digging into the stone. "No, no, no." Barrett hauled him upright, anger and pity warring on his face. "We'll get it back. We ain't beaten yet." Aerith's face was wet with tears, but her eyes were clear. She stood tall, resolve radiating from her. "I know what I have to do," she said quietly. "The only way to stop Meteor is holy. The Cetra left a way, but I have to go alone." Tifa grabbed her arm, desperation breaking through the cracks in her composure. "You don't have to do this alone. We can protect you." Aerith smiled, sad, certain. "You can't. Not from him. Only I can reach the planet now." She pressed her hands together, whispered a prayer that sent a shiver through the air. Barrett growled, but it was empty sound. What are we supposed to do? Just let you go? Aerith's hand lingered on Cloud's shoulder, fingers warm, steady. Trust me. She stepped away, vanishing into the dark corridors, her presence lingering like the scent of rain. For a long time, no one spoke. The murals stared down, the story written there now unfinished, the weight of loss pressed in, heavier than the jungle's humidity, heavier than guilt. Cloud stared at his hands, remembering the cold smoothness of the black materia, the feeling of being hollowed out and used. They found their way back to the Bronco in silence. No one slept. Barrett smoked in the shadows, rage bottled behind clenched teeth. Tifa curled up by the window, eyes swollen, clutching the keystone as if it might bring Aerith back. Even Yuffie was quiet, her usual bravado gone, replaced by a shaky, desperate energy. At dawn, Aerith's absence was a wound the light could not heal. Cloud tried to force a plan, tried to fill the silence with orders and checklists, but the words rang hollow. He was lost. Worse than after the reactor. Worse than after Midgar. This time, he'd failed when it mattered most. Red 13 spoke softly, his voice a low growl. She carries hope none of us understand, but the planet is crying out. We have to follow. Cloud looked up, searching for resolve. The only thing left was to move forward. She's heading north, to the forgotten capital. That's where we go. The Bronco limped along the coast, battered by wind and regret. The others fell into uneasy sleep, but Cloud remained awake, haunted by dreams of Sephiroth's laughter and Aerith's quiet goodbye. He replayed every moment in the temple, every warning ignored, every slip in his control. He wondered if he could ever trust himself again. They made landfall near a forest, choked with mist. Aerith's trail was fresh, a footprint in the mud, a strand of hair caught on a branch. The further north they pushed, the stranger the land became. Trees leaning in, whispering secrets, the air thick with memory. At the edge of the world, the forgotten capital rose in pale silence, stone spires gleaming under a bruised sky. Cloud felt the black Materia's absence like a phantom limb. In the city's center, a great shell-shaped altar waited, the air pulsing with sorrow. Cloud knelt, pressing his palm to the ancient stone. He could almost hear Aerith's voice in the silence, singing a song of hope and farewell. He promised himself, promised her, that he would not fail again. Above, Meteor's shadow grew longer. The wind across the plains was sharp and cold, scraping the last warmth from the air as the tiny Bronco limped north. No one spoke much. They didn't have to. Loss hung over them, every silence dense with the memory of Aerith walking into the shadows alone, the black Materia lost, the planet trembling on the verge of catastrophe. Cloud pushed them onward, but not in the way he had before. There was a new edge to his focus, a fear he couldn't name, an urgency sharpened by shame. He tried not to look at his own hands, not to remember the hollow feeling as the black Materia slipped from his grasp, not to dwell on Aerith's words as she vanished. Trust me. The first destination wasn't the forgotten capital. Instead, guided by Tifa and the fragmented Shinra research log found in Hojo's lab, a file referencing Subject V and the Nibelheim mansion, Cloud detoured to the ruins of his hometown. Nibelheim was just as he remembered, and nothing like it should be. The buildings restored, the faces familiar but wrong, their eyes too glassy, their words too rehearsed. The ghosts of memory followed him through every burned-out room. Inside the mansion, the smell of mold and old blood was overpowering. They descended to the sub-basement, where Hojo's secrets lingered in rusted locks and thick, stagnant air. There, behind a coffin, they found Vincent Valentine. He emerged with a whisper of cloth, red cloak swirling, eyes the color of dried blood. He studied the group with suspicion until Cloud mentioned the Jenova project, Sephiroth, and Hojo. A spark flickered in Vincent's eyes. Rage, or maybe guilt. "You fight Shinra? You pursue Sephiroth?" His voice was soft, echoing off stone. "Then I have reason to walk in the light again." He joined them with little ceremony, his presence unsettling but resolute. Tifa watched Cloud for any sign of recognition. He only nodded once, curt, then pushed forward, refusing to look back. From Nibelheim, they crossed to Bone Village, a shanty town of tents and fossilized dreams at the edge of a petrified forest. The excavation chief held the lunar harp, a relic that, for the right price and a bit of persuasion, passed into Cloud's hands. They moved through the sleeping forest, the air thick with memory and song, every shadow whispering Aerith's name. The forgotten capital was a skeleton of a city, pale spires curved like ribs, the ground stitched with old roads and silent pools. The planet's voice here was loud enough to make Cloud's teeth ache. Red 13 padded beside him, fur bristling. The air, it weeps. They found Aerith in the central altar, bathed in blue light, praying at the water's edge. She was serene, more present than Cloud had ever seen her, part of the stone and the sky, something old and fragile, unbreakable. Tifa tried to speak, but the words dried up in her throat. Barrett just stood guard, gun arm silent, unwilling to intrude. Cloud moved closer, something inside him breaking. His feet felt heavy, his breath caught. Aerith never turned. She knew he was there. And then Sephiroth descended. He came like a shadow torn loose from the sky, blade gleaming. Cloud tried to move, tried to shout, but his limbs betrayed him. Memory buckled. He felt himself rise, sword drawn, no longer in control. Sephiroth's voice was everywhere and nowhere, curling around Cloud's mind. "You are a puppet. Give her to me." Cloud fought, but the strings were too tight. He raised his sword, hands trembling. Aerith looked up, meeting his eyes, not with fear, but with forgiveness. In that instant, the hold snapped, and Cloud collapsed. "Scream in your name." Too late. Sephiroth's blade fell, a silver arc, impossibly fast. Aerith's body crumpled, her white materia slipping from her hair to vanish beneath the water. For a moment, the world was silent. Even the planet seemed to hold its breath. Sephiroth lingered only to taunt. Meteor will come. She was the last hope. Now, despair. Then he was gone, leaving a void where hope should have been. The party gathered around Aerith, grief too sharp to voice. Tifa wept silently, clutching Aerith's hand. Barrett knelt, head bowed. Red 13 lifted his muzzle to the sky and howled. Even Vincent, shadowed and stoic, closed his eyes. Cloud cradled Aerith in his arms and carried her into the water. He laid her gently beneath the surface, watching her sink with the white materia. The pool glowed faintly, and the ripples lingered long after she was gone. They left the forgotten capital with nothing but pain and a growing sense of dread. Northward, rumors led them to the whirlwind maze, a frozen hell of storm and shifting paths, black-cloaked figures shuffling through the snow, drawn by a will that was not their own. The wind howled, dragging their words away. Cloud pressed on, head bowed, haunted by Aerith's final smile and the echo of Sephiroth's voice. At the heart of the maze, the black materia reappeared, now in the hands of the same haunted clones. Cloud fought through hallucinations and attacks, mind battered by memories and whispers. Sephiroth's influence twisted the air, made him doubt every step, every thought. At the center, Cloud seized the black materia, sweat freezing on his skin. He stared at it, hand shaking, barely able to breathe. Tifa tried to call him back, her voice a lifeline, distant but real. Cloud, don't let him win. Remember who you are. But Sephiroth's power overwhelmed him. Cloud's vision broke. The whirlwind maze vanished, replaced by memories of Nibelheim. Flames, screams, the feeling of being someone else, someone stronger, someone not himself. Sephiroth appeared, more real than ever, encased in a cocoon of Mako. He reached out, not with a hand, but with the full weight of his will. Cloud stepped forward, the black materia held out. Here, take it. It was done. The black materia passed into Sephiroth's grasp. The sky split with crimson light, meteor, tearing its way through the heavens, bearing down on the planet. The ground shook. The Lifestream roared beneath their feet. Colossal shapes burst from the earth and sea. The weapons, planetary titans roused by impending extinction. The air was thick with their howls, the world itself convulsing as it tried to defend against a wound it could not heal. Panic and destruction followed. The whirlwind maze collapsed, snow and stone falling in sheets. Cloud and the party ran, barely escaping the wrath of the awakening planet. In the chaos, a geyser of pure Lifestream erupted. Cloud, dazed and broken, slipped from Tifa's grip, tumbling into the flow. She screamed, reaching out, but he was already gone, swallowed whole, lost beneath the surface. When the rest of the party emerged, Tifa, Barrett, Sid, Vincent, Red 13 Yuffie, Kate Sith, they did so battered and lost. Above them, meteor burned across the sky, a wound that would not close. The world descended into chaos. Cities shattered by tsunamis, earthquakes, and the rampage of the planet's weapons. Panic spread like wildfire. Sid's face was grim as he led them back to the battered Highwind, which they stole from a panicked Shinra base under siege by the weapons. Barrett cursed the sky. Tifa's hands trembled. Vincent's silence was absolute. There was no sign of Cloud. Tifa took command, her voice stronger than her shaking hands. We'll find him. We'll fight, no matter what. Aerith. Aerith gave everything for this planet. We owe it to her, and to Cloud. They scoured the continents by air, searching for any trace. Days blurred together in fear and exhaustion, until finally they found Cloud washed ashore in the remote village of Mideel, alive, but catatonic, lost in a storm of memories. Tifa sat at his bedside, day after day, her hope steady, refusing to believe the man she loved was truly gone. The rest of the party fortified the Highwind, watched the sky, and tried not to look at the growing red wound of meteor, or think about the world ending. They mourned Aerith, the white materia, the planet itself, but none of them could stop. Not now, not with so much left to lose. Above, meteor burned brighter every day. The end was coming, and somewhere in the depths of the Lifestream, Cloud Strife fought for his soul, the memory of Aerith, and the hope of the world. Mideel was a wound in the earth, steam rising from fractured soil, sulfur and salt in the air, the ocean churning beneath battered cliffs. The world itself felt raw, each sunrise thinner than the last. Meteor hung huge and ugly in the sky now, always visible, a constant, mutating threat. Every survivor knew it. Every town emptied faster with each weapon attack, each new disaster. Cloud Strife was broken, lost in a small bed at the heart of Medeel's makeshift clinic, barely breathing. Sometimes he screamed in his sleep, Sometimes he just stared at the ceiling, eyes tracking shadows no one else could see. The others took shifts by his side, but it was Tifa who never left for long. Her hands were steady, her voice soft, but her eyes betrayed the dread gnawing at her. Cloud's mind was somewhere else, adrift, lost in the Lifestream. The rest of the party waited in the heat and humidity outside. Barrett paced and cursed, one hand flexing around his new wounds and old regrets. Sid smoked by the high wind, face sour, never looking directly at the empty sky. Yuffie kept herself busy scavenging, anything to avoid the guilt for a world unraveling. Red 13 watched the horizon, nose twitching, ears alert to the smallest vibration. Vincent stood in shadow, arms folded, a silent sentinel. Meteor's approach was not quiet. The world shook with the steps of weapons, enormous living engines of the planet's will. Ultima weapon soared over the mountain peaks. Emerald weapon churned the ocean to foam. Ruby weapon spines rippled red across the sands. Their attacks were indiscriminate, devastating, a desperate immune response to the wound in the planet's body. Whole villages vanished in a night. Shinra scrambled to hold their power, and failed and pretended otherwise on every flickering screen. Tifa was the last hope for Cloud, and the world. She remembered the weight of Aerith's body in her arms, the cold hush of the altar, and she remembered every time Cloud had smiled and then lost himself. This was different. The doctors shook their heads. No physical injury, nothing to heal. He just wasn't there. Beneath the surface, Cloud floated in the Lifestream. Memories, broken, half-true, stitched together from pain, swirled around him. He heard voices, his own, but not, Tifa's, but changed. The echo of Aerith's laughter, Zack's grin, his mother's gentle rebukes, Nibelheim burning, Shinra uniforms, the smell of Mako, a room full of shattered test tubes, Sephiroth's eyes, cold, green, endless. One day, Midil shook. A low, shuddering tremor that grew until it became a roar. A weapon breached the sea. Ultima weapon, radiant and monstrous, drawn by the Lifestream boiling beneath the town. The world reeled. The villagers screamed and scattered. The party rushed to the high wind, fighting to rescue as many as they could. Tifa ran for the clinic, reaching Cloud as the earth split, as green light burst from the earth and swallowed them both. Falling, endless, dreamlike, suffocating. The Lifestream enfolded them in currents of memory and pain. Tifa felt Cloud's presence, flickering and weak. She called to him, again and again. At first, there was no answer. Inside, Cloud was lost. He wandered through fractured versions of his past. Nibelheim rebuilt and burning. Shinra halls gleaming and cold. Zack's laughter. Tifa's disappointment. The feel of Mako in his blood. The truth was slippery, always changing. He remembered standing outside the mansion, but sometimes he wasn't there at all. Sometimes he was just a voice, watching his life through someone else's eyes. Tifa found him, or something like him, shivering on the edge of memory. "Cloud," she said, voice steady, more certain than she felt. "You're not alone. I'm here. Let's find the truth, together." They walked the halls of his memories. Every scene was cracked, doubled, wrong. Cloud saw himself in Soldier Blue, but Tifa hesitated, looking at him sideways, as if she was seeing a stranger. "Cloud," she asked gently, "when did you join Soldier?" He tried to answer. The words failed. He saw Zack's face, grinning, confident, standing where he was supposed to be. Tifa's eyes filled with tears. "You never made it, did you? You weren't Soldier. You were just... you." The memories fell apart. Cloud remembered Nibelheim, flames licking at the sky, his mother's house reduced to ash, Sephiroth in the reactor, the woman in the tube. He remembered arriving with Zack, wearing a helmet, hiding his face, not ready to admit he was never enough. He remembered carrying Zack through endless grass, through rain and blood, and the taste of failure, until he finally collapsed. He remembered seeing Tifa, watching her cry over her father's body, and failing to save her. He remembered the pain, the Mako, the experiments, Hojo's voice, Sephiroth's laughter. The layers peeled away. Beneath it all there was only Cloud, scared, ordinary, furious at himself. Tifa held his hand, both of them trembling. "Cloud, it's enough. You're you. That's all I ever needed." She saw the boy she'd lost, and the man he'd become. In that moment, she knew forgiveness, for herself and for him. The world shifted. The false memories shattered. Cloud stood on his own, not as soldier, not as a hero, but as himself. Ordinary, broken, but alive. Above them, the Lifestream shuddered. Cloud reached for Tifa, and together they rose, carried upward by the current, bursting back into the world as Medeal collapsed into the sea. Sid and Barrett hauled them from the wreckage. The reunion was messy, wet, cold, alive. Cloud coughed up water, laughed at nothing, hugged Tifa, with a desperation he'd never let himself feel before. The world was burning, but Cloud was himself at last. The others saw it. Barrett nodded, respect and relief on his face. Sid clapped him on the back, grumbling about taking your sweet time. Even Yuffie managed a grin, pretending not to wipe away tears. They had no time to celebrate. Meteor's shadow grew every day. Reports came in. Huge Materia, stored at Coral and Fort Condor. Shinra, planning to seize it for their last, desperate gambit against Meteor. Bugenhagen in Cosmo Canyon sent word. The fate of the planet would turn on the balance of power. Holy and the Lifestream against Meteor. If only they could tilt the scales. Cloud's leadership was different now. Quiet, steady, honest. He laid out their plan. They would recover the huge Materia, safeguard the planet's lifeblood, and prepare for a final stand. They flew first to Peril. Shinra was already there, trying to transfer the huge Materia to their own reactors. The town was a war zone. Fires burning, refugees everywhere, guards fighting not just the party, but their own panic. Barrett led the way, the memories of his lost home burning behind his eyes. They fought through the confusion, Cloud's commands precise, Tifa and Sid watching his back. In the end, they seized the first huge Materia, a core of condensed, shimmering energy, so heavy it made the air hum. At Fort Condor, the battle was even fiercer. Shinra's forces pressed hard, desperate to gain a weapon that might turn the tide against Meteor. The party fought alongside the defenders, Red 13's flames lighting the night, Yuffie's shurikens spinning in the gloom, Vincent's gunshots ringing like bells. The fort held. The second huge Materia was theirs. In between, the world continued to fall apart. On the high wind, they saw the aftermath. Cities flooded or flattened, entire forests burning. In a makeshift camp, a former Shinra officer shared food with a child orphaned by the weapons. His uniform ragged, his old life vanished. Cloud watched, reminded of the costs on every side. At night, Cloud and Tifa stood on the High Wind's deck. The stars seemed dim, Meteor leering above them. "You're not alone anymore," Tifa said, voice fierce. "None of us are." He squeezed her hand. Silent gratitude. He was finally able to meet her eyes. The burden of false memory lifted. The party prepared for what came next. More huge Materia. The truth about Holy and the planet. The inevitable confrontation with Sephiroth. Cloud looked at his reflection in a porthole. Pale, Scarred, but real. He knew what he was fighting for now. Not the legend, not revenge, just the right to live and to let others do the same. Above them, the sky churned. The planet waited for an answer. The sky was no longer blue, not truly. Meteor dominated the heavens, a wound, pulsing crimson and violet, its approach an hourglass draining the world of time. Every day it grew larger. Every night the stars dimmed a little more, their ancient light drowned out by a dying world's last crisis. On the deck of the High Wind, the wind was sharp, the mood sharper. Cloud stood at the prow, eyes on the horizon, his reflection in the battered glass, more honest than ever. He was changed, a leader not by birthright or myth, but by bitter truth and the trust of those who followed him. He drew strength from Tifa's quiet faith, Barrett's unyielding rage, Sid's bluster, Red 13's wisdom, Yuffie's irrepressible spark, Kate Sith's awkward humor, and Vincent's steady darkness. Every one of them had lost something. Every one of them fought anyway. The task was clear. Gather the last huge materia, learn the truth Bugenhagen promised, and find a way to free Holy, Aerith's last hope for the planet. With every new weapon attack, with every report of towns razed or ocean churned to poison, the urgency grew. There was no more time for doubts or indecision. Their first stop was the Junon underwater reactor. Shinra, desperate, had deployed every resource left, guards in powered armor, scientists pushing themselves to exhaustion. As the party infiltrated the reactor, alarms blared. Floodlights painted the steel corridors in harsh white. Cloud led them, his orders crisp, no hesitation. Tifa and Barrett flanked him, weapons ready. Yuffie darted through vents, relaying positions. Vincent moved in silence, a shadow among shadows. Red 13 covered their escape routes. Below the surface, the water pressed in, cold, immense, a reminder of how small they truly were. The huge materia was locked behind reinforced glass, a pulse of blue light within the chaos. Shinra fought hard, but the world had shifted. Loyalty to the company meant little when the end was visible in the sky. More than once, a guard dropped his weapon and ran. They retrieved the huge materia, heavier than it looked, thrumming with ancient power. As they left, the reactor began to flood, alarms swallowed by the rising sea. For a moment, Cloud stared into the water, feeling the planet's agony, the urge to drown all his regrets. But Tifa's hand on his arm anchored him. They ran, escaping in the high wind as the reactor vanished beneath the waves. The next destination was Rocket Town, Sid's home, already changed by the last months of crisis. The streets were empty, the great rocket surrounded by Shinra troops, desperate enough to try anything. Scarlet herself was there, barking orders, overseeing the plan to use Sid's dream, his ship, his past, to ram huge materia straight into Meteor. Sid spat on the ground at the sight. "You want to blow my rocket just to die with some dignity," he sneered. "Fine, but you're not taking the materia with you." The party fought their way through, battle after battle, exhaustion layered on old wounds. At the launch pad, Sid took the controls, teeth gritted, hands shaking. The rocket shuddered and roared, breaking from the ground for the first and last time. The sky outside was apocalyptic, flashes of weapon fire, Meteor looming like a god. In the chaos, Cloud and the others secured the last huge materia, prying it free from the rocket's core, just before Sid barely managed to launch himself clear. The rocket streaked toward Meteor and failed. The materia didn't even scratch it. Sid, battered and breathless, let out a stream of curses that somehow left the party laughing for the first time in weeks. There was nothing else left to do. 4 huge Materia now lay secured in the high wind's hold, a chorus of power, each humming with the lifeblood of the planet. The world below was fractured, refugees stumbling through ruined towns, Shinra's grip finally broken by the scale of the disaster, the once untouchable company, now just another name for loss. In the shell of a city, a musician played a battered violin, his song a wordless plea for hope, a crowd of survivors listening for the future in every note. The party returned to Cosmo Canyon. The wind there was different, older, laced with memory and mourning. Bugenhagen waited, eyes shining with sorrow and resolve. He ushered them into the heart of the canyon, past the great bonfire, into the star-lit observatory, where the story of the planet waited to be told. Cloud listened, fully present, as Bugenhagen traced the lineage of disaster, Jenova, the calamity from the sky, an alien wound that never healed. The Cetra, healers and wanderers, whose memory lived on in Aerith. The Lifestream, lifeblood of the world, now threatened by the wound that was Meteor, and the anchor that was Sephiroth. The 4 huge Materia, distilled hope, the last reserves of strength. Bugenhagen's voice was grave. Holy is awake, but not free. Aerith summoned it, her life the final key. But Sephiroth anchors himself in the northern crater, blocking Holy's will. The Lifestream churns, unable to reach its purpose. Cloud asked questions now, about the planet, about Jenova, about the Cetra and Holy's power. He pressed until he understood the cosmic balance and the risk. To free Holy, they would have to break Sephiroth's grip from within the crater. He's using the same power that broke me, Cloud said, his voice level. He's the wound. We have to cut him out. Before they left, Bugenhagen showed them a Cetra device, an altar hidden deep in the forgotten capital, able to reveal the struggle between Holy and Meteor. They flew there on the high wind, Meteor now so huge it cast a permanent dusk over the world. In the altar's pale glow, Cloud saw visions. Aerith's spirit, luminous in the Lifestream, reaching toward Holy. Sephiroth's shadow, a black knot, holding back the flood. They watched together, party and purpose unified. In the dimness, Tifa squeezed Cloud's hand, her faith now steady as stone. Barrett gripped his gun arm, jaw clenched, promising himself and Marlene that he'd see the sun rise again. Red 13's tail flicked, restless, eyes on the edge of history. Yuffie wept quietly, her bravado worn thin, but her courage unbroken. Kate Sith tried a joke and failed, but stayed close. Vincent said nothing, but his presence was a wall against despair. Cloud stepped from the altar, changed, not by revelation, but by resolve. "We know what to do," he said. "We go to the crater. We end this." That night on the high wind, the party gathered for their last strategy meeting. The maps were spread, the plans reviewed, the risks measured and accepted. Each of them, in turn, spoke not of tactics, but of why they would fight. Tifa for love, Barrett for his daughter and every soul lost, Sid for a dream never quite dead, Red 13 for the promise of a world to outlive his own, Yuffie for her people and her pride, Kate Sith for a hope his creators had forgotten, Vincent for the memory of Lucretia and the chance to stop what he had helped unleash, Cloud, finally, for himself, and for Aerith. The northern crater waited, howling with Mako storms, weapon fire in the distance, the planet itself keening for relief. The air on the high wind was heavy, every breath a countdown. Cloud stood at the bow, eyes on the storm. He did not flinch. He was no longer running from his past, no longer lost in another man's memory. He had failed, lost, learned, and risen again. There was no more legend to uphold, only the truth. He would fight, because it was right, because others could not, because something had to matter, even at the end of the world. The high wind banked toward the crater. Meteor filled half the sky, its heartbeat shaking the air. Somewhere below, a single flower forced its way through the cracked earth, a promise, small but unbroken, that hope endures. The last battle was about to begin. The high wind screamed into the midnight sky, buffeted by winds born from Meteor's hateful gravity. The world below was broken. Oceans churned, towns leveled, the planet bleeding Lifestream like open veins. All that remained of hope was a battered ship, a handful of survivors, and the promise of one final stand. Inside the airship, the atmosphere was electric. Weapons clanked as last checks were made. Old arguments had died, replaced by purpose. Cloud stood at the front, hands resting on the railing, gaze locked on the writhing storm that marked the northern crater. Meteor dominated the sky, a burning wound, devouring the stars, its fall so close now that night was never dark, only sickly red. Tifa came to stand beside him. She didn't ask if he was ready. She just nodded, eyes steady. Sid barked orders to the crew, smoke trailing from his lips, his curses almost affectionate. Barrett cycled his gun arm, each motion deliberate, jaw tight, as he stared down at a world he'd fought to save. Yuffie tucked her headband tighter, trembling, but stubbornly joking anyway. Red 13 prowled the perimeter, silent, tail aglow, eyes fierce. Vincent waited in shadow, Kate Sith making awkward little prayers to a god he'd never believed in. They descended through the clouds, the storm growing more savage, Mako energy tearing at the hull. "If we don't make it," Sid shouted over the roar, "just know you all pissed off the right people." There were no speeches, just a dozen small gestures, shoulder claps, tight nods, a last smile from Tifa that said everything she could not voice. The northern crater yawned beneath them, a spiral of obsidian and green fire, Meteor's pressure cracking the earth, Lifestream spilling from the planet's wounds. The high wind circled once, then lowered the party onto a jagged outcrop. As soon as their feet hit stone, the full force of the crater pressed in. Heat, cold, raw energy, the air so thick with Mako it was hard to breathe. Cloud led the way down, sword strapped to his back, purpose in every step. The path twisted through broken stone and shifting reality. Gravity bent, colors bled together. Sometimes Cloud heard Aerith's voice, a gentle murmur beneath the shriek of the wind. He let it guide him. Enemies poured from the dark, Jenova remnants, twisted echoes of the calamity that had scarred the planet. Each fight was brutal, exhausting, but different now. Cloud wasn't fighting for the illusion of heroism, but to protect what was left. Every swing of the Buster Sword was grounded in the memory of friends lost and the hope of those still alive. Barrett laid down a withering hail of fire, cursing Shinra, fate, and the universe with equal venom. Tifa fought with a grace that bordered on rage, every punch an answer to the years of helplessness. Sid covered the rear, shouting encouragement, the old pilot refusing to let his people fall. Red 13 was a burning streak in the gloom, a flame refusing to go out. Yuffie's blades flashed, her bravado no longer a mask, but a weapon of defiance. Kate Sith, battered but determined, patched wounds and bought precious seconds. Vincent, silent and lethal, brought a kind of finality to every shot. The crater's heart was a nightmare. Tunnels of pulsating flesh, Mako rivers, whispers that tried to twist memory and purpose. Sephiroth's presence was everywhere, cold and mocking. Cloud felt it like an itch under his skin, reminder of every doubt and failure. At the center, the ground opened, a vast chamber, Meteor's glow burning through cracks in the ceiling. In its midst floated safer Sephiroth, his form monstrous and beautiful, wings unfurled, eyes cold as space. The air froze. Time seemed to fracture. Sephiroth spoke, and it was not just sound but command, a will that pressed on Cloud's mind, threatening to unravel him. You are nothing. You are a shadow of a hero. This is the end you deserve. Cloud felt the old fear surge, but it broke against something harder. Tifa's memory, Barrett's resolve, Aerith's quiet courage. He stood tall, gripped tight on his sword. Not your puppet, not your shadow. I'm myself. The battle was cataclysm. Sephiroth unleashed meteor fragments, waves of malice, illusions from Cloud's own past. The party rallied, Barrett tanking blows that would have killed anyone else, Tifa and Yuffie flanking, Red 13, and Vincent striking from the edges. Sid's voice cut through the chaos. Keep moving! Hit him where it hurts. Cloud met Sephiroth in the center, blade against blade, will against will. The world shrank to that point. The only thing real was the weight of the Buster sword and the truth in his heart. Every memory, the pain, the confusion, the forgiveness became fuel. Sephiroth faltered. Cloud pressed in, vision blurring with exhaustion, but unbroken. For a moment, time fractured again. He stood alone, Sephiroth's spirit facing him in the void. A final test. You're just a failed experiment, Sephiroth hissed. Cloud shook his head. I'm not perfect. I'm not a hero. But I'm not alone, and I'm not you. He struck. Light flared. The echo of Aerith's presence, warm and soft, shielded him as he drove Sephiroth's essence from the world. The shadow unraveled, torn apart by the Lifestream pouring through the wound. Meteor fell, unstoppable, a mass of fire and annihilation. Holy, summoned by Aerith's final prayer, rose from the planet's heart, a lance of pure light. But it was not enough. Meteor burned through Holy's defense, consuming it, bearing down on Midgar. In the last moments, the ground erupted. The Lifestream, rivers of pure memory and hope, poured from the earth, surging into the sky. Cloud saw Aerith, radiant within it, her hand raised in benediction. The Lifestream merged with Holy, amplifying its power, pushing back against Meteor's relentless hunger. For an instant, the world held its breath. Then, with a thunder that shook every mountain, Meteor shattered, fire and stone dissolving into light. The sky burned white, then faded. Silence descended. The party stood among the ruins, exhausted, battered, but alive. Above, the first true sunrise in weeks bled gold into the broken sky. The planet shuddered, and then stilled, the wound closing, life returning. Cloud stared at his hands, feeling the pulse of Lifestream beneath his skin. He looked at Tifa, found her already looking back. No words were needed. They had survived. They had saved what could be saved. The future would be written in the scars, but it would exist. Barrett slumped, laughter and tears mingling as he gazed at the horizon. Marlene gets to see another day. Sid wiped his nose, pretending not to care. Yuffie whooped. Red 13 bowed his head in quiet reverence. Vincent simply nodded, one final exorcism complete. In the days that followed, the world staggered to its feet, towns rebuilt. Survivors planted gardens in the ashes. Bugenhagen's words echoed, "Life is not an end, but a cycle. Every scar becomes a seed." In Midgar, a lone child planted a single flower where concrete had cracked open, white petals shining in the new sun. Tifa, standing beside Cloud, squeezed his hand. We start again. Cloud, no longer haunted by the question of who he was, watched the planet breathe, and finally understood. Survival is its own kind of heroism. The memory of Aerith, of all they'd lost, would never leave them, but neither would the chance to try again. The planet healed, slow and steady. Life endured.